this ruins everything. Like having a kid right now ruins everything because like it's gonna take away from my focus on this. Getting that letter of failing out, Indi expecting, basically when I failed out, the next day I go into work and they're like, hey, we're gonna have to transfer you. Like you're gonna have to go on a ship somewhere because we can't keep you here anymore because you can't go back to rescue swimmer. So literally everything just came crashing in. Like everything, it was just horrible. And that's when that's what really sparked us to seek a deeper relationship with God. I'm Brennan Kelly. I'm a holistic health coach and a dad and a husband and a servant of God. What brought me here to Hawaii? That has a lot of different ways that I could take that. In short, me and my wife Indi, were feeling called to Hawaii. We didn't know what it would even look like because I was active duty military at the time, and I had been active duty for my whole adult life. Ever since I was 18, I had been in the Coast Guard, and it's all I knew. And so I thought, well, if God's calling us there, then it must need to work through the Coast Guard somehow. So I called the person in charge of where I was going to be stationed next and asked him if I could get Hawaii, and he said that there's a 0% chance of that happening. And so I took that back to Indi and we prayed about it, and we felt like God was really just calling us to leave the military and just do it. And it was really irresponsible to the world standards because I had 12 years in the Coast Guard, 8 years till I could retire, but we just felt like we had to do it. And so we packed up suitcases and Rubbermaid containers and we moved here with our 3 girls, and now we're here. God really just orchestrated everything beautifully because like there's no way, one of my friends always says, in order to make it in Hawaii, you have to be called to Hawaii. And I think it's been very obvious over the past year that we were called here because we have just been taken care of. I mean, from finding brand new smokers in the trash to all people giving us furniture to every need that my newborn baby has being met by others, to even the house that we're in. You know, our landlords are giving us such a gracious deal just because they felt like God was telling them to give us that deal. And so it's just crazy how God orchestrated it all. Yeah, so when I said I was willing to throw my life away for my dream, what I was speaking to there was rescue swimmer school. Making it through rescue swimmer school and becoming a rescue swimmer was my idol. It was all that I wanted. I had this idea that if I made it through school and became a rescue swimmer in the Coast Guard, just a brief background, rescue swimmer is basically like the elite of the Coast Guard and of all the military branches. It has like a 75% attrition rate. Very few people make it through. The class that I was in, we started with 22 people. I think one from my original 22 made it through. And so 6 months of just grueling. But once you make it, you're the guy that's in all the calendars and on all the websites and on all the advertisements for the Coast Guard. You're the guy that's jumping out of the helicopter, and everybody, you have the respect of everyone. So I thought if I could make it to that point, I would have the approval of everyone that I was seeking approval from that I didn't have. I thought that I'd have fulfillment. I thought that that's what success was. And so I was willing to sell it all for that. I was willing to die for it. Like literally, I would have rather died training in the pool than having to say that I didn't make it through school and became, the term is a swimmer butt. I was gonna be a swimmer, but this happened, and I didn't want to be that. And so that's when I said I was willing to sell it all, that's what I meant. And every waking moment went into training, every second of available thought came into different mindfulness practices or whatever I could do to give myself an edge to make it through school. That's all that I cared about, to the detriment of my family. Like I kind of put my family on the back burner. I did put my family on the back burner. I was trying to get the approval of just man in general. I don't think it was anyone in particular. I think where I grew up in the Bible Belt of the Midwest, there wasn't a lot of encouragement that happened just culturally. It was kind of nitpicking, and if you were different, then you stood out. And I was really different growing up. I mean, I bred bearded dragons and ball pythons, and you know, I just had a lot of like really weird interests. I was obsessed with Steve Irwin, like that was my hero. And I think, yeah, he's the best. And I think I just never fit in. And all I wanted to do was just fit in. And so through seeking fitting in, I found myself in a lot of situations I shouldn't have been. I got addicted to opioids at a young age. I think 16, I started, doing pills, and almost needed to do pills like daily to even function, just because I was trying to numb a lot of pain. And so when I say gain the approval of man, it really is just man in general. Like, I just wanted people to look up to me, and I wanted to do something that people would recognize me for and be like, that guy has it together,
The pills, like, how did that present itself? How did you get started with that?
Yeah, I had a really bizarre childhood, and I'll just preface it by saying this: I love my parents. I have a really good relationship with my dad now. He's grown a lot spiritually, and so I just want to say that up front. But as I was growing up, it was not good, and it was abusive, and it was all over the place. My mom and dad would separate often. We would kind of flee the area, and my mom we'd have a temporary home for a little bit, and then they'd get back together. So there's just no stability. It was just, I literally was in like turmoil in my mind all the time. And at the time, social media wasn't as prominent. There wasn't like these like self-help books like as readily available, and not that I would have even read them as a 15-year-old, but I just had nowhere to turn to get out of my head. And I think opioids and pills in particular, and really just anything, weed, anything that could get me out of my head, I was seeking that, because my head was chaos, and it was, what is life even? I had a lot of like deep philosophical thoughts that I didn't know what to do with them. Even from a young age, it's kind of crazy that I'm talking about this because I don't normally share, but I used to have nightmares of eternity from like the age of like 4, where it would literally send me into this like panic attack, and I would like have to go to my sisters, and they would like pray for me, but it was just something that I was always battling. It was always looming, and I didn't know what to do with it. And I didn't have any, there was Christians in my life, but there was no one really there's no real disciples of Jesus, people walking the way of Jesus, because I think if there were, that would have been desirable to me. But through my childhood and growing up in Baptist church, and my mom was kind of in and out of different cults and different crazes, there was never anything that I could pinpoint and like, hey, I want that.
What your mom was doing during that time?
Yeah, my mom, my dad, having the issues that he had, he didn't really know how to, he didn't know how to be a dad. He didn't know how to be a husband. He wasn't shown how to love or how to care for others. I also think that he had like a learning disability, and so I think he was kind of always put out. He was uprooted from his home in Canada, where he had a lot of stability, to the ghetto of Detroit when he was 7 years old, and would get beat up on the streets all the time. So he had a really tough childhood. And I think he never learned how to heal from trauma, or how to face any of it, or how to uproot it. And so he just brought that into his home life. And he had 7 kids with my mom. And I think there was a very different relationship with each of them. But with me, it was pretty abusive. I think I was a lot like him, and rebellious, and kind of wanted to like stand up for things I didn't believe in. And I think he just didn't know how to handle me. I had a lot of, I was very reactionary. So when the home was chaotic, I wasn't gonna just sit around and let it happen. Like, I was gonna stand up for the things. I was gonna stand up for my little brothers. I was gonna stand up for my mom. And I think that caused a lot of chaos. So then there's that going on. And then there's my mom, who also didn't know how to handle the abuse and everything. And so she was just always looking for an out, or always looking for something to dump the responsibility on. Oh, it's because he's narcissistic, or narcissist, or it's because of this, and then she was always looking for the next thing. And so being in a Baptist church, there wasn't really any freedom. There was just a lot of condemnation, and there's a lot of underlying issues going on in the church, but that's just the way things were in the Midwest. That's just what Christianity was. And so she was kind of always kind of ahead of the time, like looking for something more, and kind of got into some hippie stuff, got into different things, and eventually kind of joined this like real out there cult. And through that, there was news articles that she was like baptizing people in our bathtub, and so then I kind of got a bad name for that, okay? And so people knew me as like, yo, isn't your mom like the one that's like, and I'm like, no, dude, that's not me. And I was homeschooled from a young age, and then I went to high school in 10th grade, and that was just a recipe for disaster, because here you have this kid that's kind of, everyone's already kind of judging because new, and kids are ruthless, and high school is a very toxic environment. And I wasn't prepared. No one taught me how to stand up for yourself. No one taught me how to hold to the no one taught me how to hold to the values and the morals that you found true. So basically I was just in survival mode. And I was just like, whatever I have to do to fit in here. And I found myself in a crowd that was using drugs. and that's where kind of things stem from, you know? And it's like I could fit in that crowd. So that's kind of where it went. And I never, it's funny looking back, like I was so reactionary, I never did things with the intent to like hurt anyone or with the intent to be bad, because I still had a very strong conscience. It literally all stemmed from this place of just wanting to fit in, just wanting to be accepted. Yeah.
So the Coast Guard, how did you get introduced to the Coast Guard? Was this a lifelong dream?
Yeah.
Or did it?
Well, the Coast Guard, I have to give credit to my big brother Michael. He joined the Coast Guard, and then also I had an uncle, my uncle Jay, who was in the Coast Guard. So I got to give them a shout out for kind of just getting the wheels turning in that direction, that was even a possibility, because Midwest, Missouri, you're literally the center of the United States, and so you're as landlocked as it gets. And I kind of always had these dreams of like being a surfer. Like I would watch Steve Irwin and I'd see him going to all these like really cool places, and him surfing in Africa and surfing off the coast of California, and then he'd go and catch some snakes, and I'm like, that would be an awesome life. And so I think the Coast Guard allowed me to dream a little bit, because there wasn't much dream. It's funny, I found a essay that I wrote in English class in like 11th grade, and I said I wanted to be like a landscaper, and I'm like, where did that even come from? Like, I don't even like, you know what I mean? Like, I kind of, like, I enjoyed a little bit. It's not something I want to do for a career, but I just, like, didn't know myself. And so I think it gave me the opportunity to dream, because being in the Coast Guard, you're moving around, there's adventure, there's search and rescue. And at the time, I was living in an apartment where my roommate was dealing, and it was a hot mess. I was getting stuff stolen all the time, and I'm like, I got to do something, because this isn't me. Like, this isn't my life. Like, there's something I got to do. And so I literally, you know, got rid of everything, got clean, was able to pass a drug test to get into the Coast Guard, and I just sent it. And like, next thing I knew, I'm in boot camp at 18 years old, and that was kind of just the start of the adventure.
That presented it because that's just the thing, or like how?
Rescue Swimmer presented itself because I had always had a dream of doing something important. I cared about people a lot, and I really care about people. And even at you know, that age, 18, 19, I was like, I want to be actively involved in saving people's lives. It's kind of funny because I found a little book that I made when I was a kid. I used to like make books all the time and like staple them together, kind of draw pictures, and I would have my mom take them to a UPS store and copy them, and I'd send them to like my aunts and uncles and stuff like that. And so I had this one book where it actually was like a rescue swimmer saving people out of a helicopter, you know? And he was a guy, he went down on like, I think I had a ladder, which isn't actually used, but he like went down on this ladder, saved these people, and it's this whole story of like a happy story of this like this family that got rescued by this guy. And so in my mind, I'm like, man, that'd be like really cool to be that guy, you know, to be that guy that people look to like, you know, like he saved us, and be able to use like your physical ability to actually like save someone like that. I would always just, in my mind, I would just think like, man, if someone was drowning, I would like get out there and I'd be the one. Like, I just had that in me. And so with that being said, I guess Rescue Swimmer, it presented itself at an early age, but then whenever I was signing up, whenever I was like, you know, signing the dotted line to go to boot camp, the guy who was helping me, my recruiter who was helping me join, he was in aviation. And so he was one of the guys that was in the helicopters, and he's like, dude, like, don't listen to anyone, you gotta be a rescue swimmer. Like, if you want it, like, you just gotta go get it. And I'm like, okay, like, I'll do that. show up to the Coast Guard, like I show up to my boat, and I didn't understand that there's kind of like this rivalry between like boat and helicopters, and like the boat guys hate the helicopter guys. And so I was on a boat and everybody's like, you're never gonna make it through rescue swimmer, like you're scrawny. And I was small. I was the smallest guy in my high school. Like I was a tiny dude, no self-confidence, like no, like I wasn't into like working out at the time or anything. And I'm just like, I'm just gonna do it. I had a couple influential people in my time. My executive officer at the time, Mr. Leggett, I haven't thought about him in a long time, so it's funny. He gave me this book called The 4 Hour Body, and it was by Timothy Ferriss. And that kind of started me down this like whole journey of really getting into health and kind of self-awareness and knowledge, and kind of just that whole path where your mind's kind of open, like, hey, I don't have to do things in the way that I was brought up and I was told on how to do them. Like, you can make a name for yourself. You can do something different. And so I think rescue swimmer, in my mind, it was that. You know what I mean? That's like someone that has it together, and that's what I want. And so then I put my name on the rescue swimmer list. I was stationed on a icebreaker in Detroit, and so we were underway a lot. I didn't have a ton of time to train in the pool, but I did as much as I could. Any moment that I got to train, I was training because I just wanted it so bad. So rescue swimmer school, I mean, it's pretty, it's easy to get there. It's hard to make it out on the other side. So you just basically just put your name on a list, and then as long as you can pass the PT test, and I passed all the PT tests and whatnot. I had some guys that had previously gone through and failed out who kind of were like, hey, be on the lookout for this, train this, do that. And so I just took everything they said. I was watching every video on YouTube on how to be a rescue swimmer. And so yeah, so then I put my name on the list. I was in the Coast Guard for 3 years, and then I got my orders to go to rescue swimmer school in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. And so picked up everything and headed there. Yeah.
And so you were married at the time?
Yeah, I was married at the time. So Indi actually came along with me. She was able to be a live-in nanny about an hour from the school. So on the weekends, I was able to kind of sneak out and go see Indi and hang out with her for the weekend. And so that's kind of like how we managed life during that time. Okay, I met Indi. We met sophomore year of high school. We were both homeschooled up until sophomore year, and then got thrown into the fire together. And so we just were like, we were in like 3 classes together, I think, that first year, and we really just started as friends and just like really enjoyed each other's company and started hanging out a lot. And you know, at the time, she was like the goody two-shoe, you know what I mean? And like all the guys were kind of like, oh, there's this new girl, and like kind of in competition for her. And at the time, I was like this scrawny, you know, kind of nerdy kid. And so she just felt safe with me, and we were just like friends. And it kind of just started from there. And then I think we started dating. Like, she wasn't allowed to date until she was 16. And I think we might have started like, you know, 2 months early or something like that, like 15 3/4 or something, and had to keep it on the hush hush. And so she was just always has been my rock and has always been my stability, because as you know, as I shared and I kind of went south like during high school, she was just like, she's basically the reason I'm alive. Like, if I'm just being honest, like for real. So yeah. And then we were just together ever since. We got married when we were 18. After I graduated boot camp, I flew home, and typical military story, got married, except not typical marriage story. We're 12 years in and still really happy. So she was, and it's funny because I'll ask her about that. I'll just be like, yo, what were you thinking? Like, when I was such a hot mess, like, why did you stick around? And she just always saw my heart and saw who I was, and saw everything that was going on as just like an exterior, like an exoskeleton of myself. Like, it wasn't actually me. And so since she met me when I was like that innocent 15-year-old, like, she knew that was me, and that I was just kind of transformed by my environment and my situations, which I don't know how she did that. Like, I don't know how she did that and stuck with me through all the chaos that I put her through, but she did. And so, yeah, I'm thankful she did. She always knew that to me, it was just like a game. Like, I was just like having a girlfriend. And it's funny because we've been talking about this a lot the past week, because we've kind of been like going back through our past and just like kind of communicating about it. And to me, it was always just like a game almost. Like, I'm like, oh, I'll think about a real relationship like when I'm older. Like right now, like, it's just high school and I'm just trying to like figure things out and I'm a hot mess and everything's reactionary. But for her, like she like knew she was gonna marry me, which is like crazy. Especially when I know I've already said it, but I was literally like the smallest kid in my high school. Like I was like 103 pounds. It's funny because her mom always jokes around. I think she thinks it embarrasses me, so she like brings it up to everyone. She's like, yeah, we used to call Brennan Indy's little friend or whatever, because I was like real short. And so, yeah, but I think like her, like she was always, even through high school, and even though there was like mistakes made and whatnot, even on her part, she always had this like very strong just moral compass that she was able to not deviate far from. And she's been the most stable person I've ever met. You know what I mean? Like I met her when we were 15 and we're now 30. So we've known each other more of our life than we didn't know each other. And we've been together more of our life than we weren't. And to see someone for 15 years be that stable for so many people and not get the credit that she deserves is like, it's incredible. Like, it's really incredible.
Curious, like, how much you enjoyed, like, the swimming part of it.
Oh, it's torture. All right, rescue swimmer school. I mean, to put it in one word, it was torture. It was mental, physical, emotional, spiritual torture. And I know that can sound dramatic to people, but you're literally isolated from your family, thrown into a group of people that you just met for the first day. If you watch like any military movies on kind of like Navy SEAL training or something like that, where you kind of just get thrown in and then it's like first day, like they're taking you out in the ocean and this and that. It's like that, like it's legitimate. Like you show up first night and you just have so much adrenaline. They tell you be at the pool, 4:30 a.m., like standing straight, and it just creates so much anxiety, like more anxiety than humanly possible to withstand, at least for me. I think there's people that maybe had gone through stuff in their childhood that might have like bred them for that, like maybe like really hard sports training or like a really mean like football coach or something like that. But for me, it was like pure torture. Like I'm like, am I even gonna survive today? Because right away, they throw a brick in the pool and say like, go grab that brick, and you have to like swim across the pool with the brick, and they're like, that brick's my baby, you better not let it touch the water. Well, they're like splashing you in the face, and the dude, like literally happened, the dude in front of me and the dude behind me like just started drowning with their brick and going down, and they're like, if you drop that brick, you're done. And I'm like I can't drop this brick, like, and they're yelling at these two other guys, and the dude in front of me and the dude behind me, both of them dropped their brick, and that was it. They're done. Like that was it. Like, day 3 or whatever, like their dreams just crushed. You know what I mean? Something that they might have been training for years. And so in my mind, I'm like, that's not gonna happen. Like I'm not gonna ring that bell. I'm not gonna be the guy who quits. I'm like, I would rather die. Like literally, I'd rather die than have to go over and ring the bell and say I quit. And so through that super intense training, the pool is like an Olympic-sized pool. They can simulate like 4-foot waves in it. They have like fake lightning. They'll turn off the lights and have like, fake rain kind of blowing about, and it's just really intense. And then all the instructors at the time are just like these huge ripped yoked dudes, and you have to like save them from these like crazy situations. Like they'll be like acting like they're having a stroke, in a simulated boat, and you'll have to go pull them out, and then they'll just start fighting you in the middle of it, and you have to like keep your calm while you're just like inhaling a bunch of water, you know what I mean? And just like the water confidence, like your water confidence has to be just so strong, because if it's not, like your mind will like play tricks on you, and your mind will lie to you. And I think it's really escalated when you're in an uncomfortable position, and being under water and not having any air is probably the most uncomfortable position you can be in. And so we'd have to do these drills where we'd swim underwater while holding our breath, and you would literally hear, we call it chicken necking. We would hear people like because their body was just out of oxygen, and their lungs were trying to basically force oxygen to the exterior parts of their muscles. And so while you're underwater and you're having to hold your breath, you're hearing that going on, and that's triggering all sorts of anxiety and panic within you. But if you go to the surface and you're done. And so it's just like I know it might sound like I'm like dramatizing it a little bit, but it actually was like that intense. And that's why one guy from the 22 made it. I think within the first 10 days of class, we were down to 10 guys. and so your friends are just dropping off, and it's just like, man, that guy, he swam in college, you know? That guy was a surfer. Like, I'm a kid from the Midwest, like, what the heck am I even doing here, you know? And you start to, like, get in your head about these things. But I just wanted it so bad, and so I was willing to just push through that. And so, yeah, that's kind of like what school looked like. And then the event that happened, that I would say is probably the most life-changing event of my life, was that I think I made it to the final 6 or 7 guys. We're you know, a couple months in. I had passed a couple tests, was feeling pretty good, like, hey, I got a chance at this, like I might be able to make it through, and if I don't make it through this time, I'm definitely going to make it through next time I come to school, because I'll prepare. And we were doing this drill where we had to basically throw our mask across the pool. We had to swim underwater without taking a breath, find our mask, we had to put our mask on, we had to blow the air out of our nose while we're sitting on the bottom of the pool so our mask would clear, all the water would clear out of it, and then we'd have to surface with no water in our mask. And so you're basically holding your breath. Everybody's like looking for their mask, because you had to get your mask, you couldn't get somebody else's, and so we're trying to hold our breath, no goggles, you can't really see what's going on, and it was just like really pretty chaotic training. Well, I came to the surface after finding my mask, and I had water in my mask, and so they said, get down and do it again. And so I dropped my mask and I do it again, and came back up, a little bit of water. And the instructor at this point, when they see someone struggling, they hone in. Like it's like a pack of wolves. Like they're like, so they all come over and they're like, hey, let's see if we can break him, you know, because they're trying to break you in school, because they don't want you to train, they don't want you to break in the real environment. So the whole goal of school is to break every single person, and then the ones that are unbreakable make it through and they become the rescue swimmer. So they kind of honed in, and they're like, you know, yelling at me and being like, clear your mask. And well, I remember maybe after the 3rd or 4th time, I go down and I'm like, you know, everything starts getting black, and I'm like, ooh, I think this is it. Like, but I don't care. Like, I just got to do it. And then I passed out. And where I passed out was pretty close to the side of the pool. It was actually a bridge in the middle of the pool. So there's water on this side, water on this side, and then there's this like kind of elevated bridge. And the instructor, I guess he reached in the water, pulled me out onto my back. I'm passed out. One of all my buddies, they told me this afterward, that one of the instructors ran by them, and as he's running by them, he's like yelling like, please don't die, please don't die. Because you know, nobody wants somebody to die on their watch. And I guess they went and got the AED or whatever to, you know, kind of shock me back to life, because they were doing compressions and stuff. And anyway, I think I came through pretty fast. I wasn't like out super long, but when I came to, I started throwing up blood everywhere. And so I started, like, my whole shirt just was like covered in blood. So they're kind of freaking out. They call the ambulance. The ambulance comes. I get rushed to the ER. Come to find out, it wasn't like anything super serious. As freedivers call it squeeze. It's where your lungs, just from the different pressures of going up and down too fast, the blood vessels in your lungs burst. And so that's what happened, and then that's why I was throwing up blood. Well, what happened next was, I'm like, I'm not going to let this keep me down. So I'm like, I'm just going to kind of lie my way through just so I can get back into training. And so I'm like, hey, it wasn't a big deal. Like, it was just kind of this thing. I feel good now. They let me come back to training. I would have days where basically I would have blood, like I would have blood in my mouth, like coming up from my lungs, and what I would do is I would like wipe my hand over it and try to wipe it on my shorts and stuff. And one of the instructors actually saw me one time, and he's like, are you bleeding? And I'm like, no, I'm good. Like, you know, just like trying to keep it hush hush, because I just want to make it through school. And I'm like, if I can just, we were coming up on Christmas break, we had like a week off, and I'm like, if I can just make it to Christmas break, I'll be good. Well, we're doing a test, and I'm buddy towing one of the biggest instructors. It's super heavy, and in the middle of the test, my lungs they couldn't keep up, and I passed out again, and they pulled me out, started spitting up the blood again. And so they're like, hey, you got to go off for testing. Like, you got something wrong with you. So I go, and I'm getting all this different testing. I get bone marrow drawn. I get a lung, like, oscopy, whatever it's called, you know, camera stuck down in my lung to check it out. Like, and over the time, I developed like bronchitis and got really sick because my lungs were just so messed up. So anyway, all this kind of transpires, and they're like, hey, you can't come back to school. Like, I'm like fighting with the doctor trying to get back to school. They're like, hey, you got to take a break, or you got to get approval from a higher level because of everything that happened. And so what we're going to do with you is we're going to put you in the ID card office where you're just going to make ID cards every day, recover, rest, and then we'll get you back into school as soon as you get cleared. And so I'm like, okay. So weeks turn into months, months turn into a year turns into a year and a half, and the whole time during that year and a half, in my mind, I'm saying, I'm in the next class. I have to train. Like, they could call me today and they could say, hey, we have a spot, you're in. And so I'm at the pool, I was taking these master swim classes at like 4:30 in the morning, like just getting in the water as much as I could. All the while, just kind of in chaos in my mind, because I'm like, if it doesn't work out, like my whole life's just going to come crashing down. But I wouldn't I kind of avoided that thought because I couldn't even let myself go there. And I'm like, I'm just going to push through. Well, after a year and a half of training that way, thinking that I'm going to go back to school, having dreams every night that I get through school and I make it through school, I get a letter, and my supervisor gets a letter, and he calls me into his office and he says, hey, we got this, and you're actually disqualified from aviation. Like, you can't go aviation. So your rescue swimmer school dreams, like your dreams of being a rescue swimmer are done. And I was just like, that was the most wrecking thing that ever could have happened, because I just like poured my whole life into it, and it was all that mattered to me. And so, I mean, there's not many times where I cried in my life, but I just like, he's like, hey, go home for the day. And I just like went out to my truck and was just like bawling. Like, it was just the worst day of my life. It seems silly looking back at how much it affected me, like now being where I'm at with having kids and stuff, but at the time, it was the most important thing. And so when your world gets wrecked like that, you know, that's why I have such a heart for like athletes that like don't make it through and everything, because it's like, man, that really like will wreck you. Like, when you have committed all of your focus to this one objective and then your dream gets pulled out from underneath you, like there's not a worse feeling in the world. Because I mean, even with things like other types of grief, this one just seems like there's no way out. Like, it just seems like that's it, and like your life is kind of over, you know, is what the narrative that you kind of tell yourself. And so, yeah, so then, I mean, my dreams were over at that point. I was at rock bottom. We had just found out, I'll go back a little bit, a couple of weeks before that, we found out that Indi was pregnant, and that, it sounds horrible saying, but was the worst news possible to me, because I was like, hey, like, I have to make it through school. Like, after I make it through school and I'm a rescue swimmer, like, we can have all the kids you want. You know, Indi, we can like have as many kids as you want, but I just have to get through this objective, and then we can start things. But this is like, this ruins everything. Like having a kid right now ruins everything, because like I'm not going to be able to, it's going to take away from my focus on this, and which is horrible looking back, but it's where I was at. And so anyway, so, you know, getting that letter of failing out, Indi expecting, basically when I found out that day, like the next day I go into work and they're like, hey, we're going to have to transfer you. Like, you're going to have to go on a ship somewhere because we can't keep you here anymore because you can't go back to rescue swimmer. So literally everything just came crashing in. Like, everything. It was just horrible. And that's when that's what really sparked us to seek a deeper relationship with God. And we started like actually going to church weekly and seeking community and things like that. So it opened the door for a lot more, but at the time it was the worst.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was long-winded.
No, it was beautiful.
So then after rescue swimmer school, so, you know, we made some of our best friends, Shane and Sydney. Shane was the youth pastor at the church, and I attribute a lot of where I'm at today to him, because he kind of showed me that you can be fulfilled through serving. You know, he was the youth pastor, and I saw how much joy and life and fulfillment he had just from like pouring into kids. And in my mind, I thought the only way I could achieve fulfillment and success was if I reached this goal of being a rescue swimmer being a rescue swimmer. But what he showed me was that you could have that through following your calling in God. And so at that point was really when me and Indi surrendered things, and we're like, hey, God, wherever you want to take us next, we're open to it, because we kind of want to submit to your will now. And we didn't really know what that looked like, because we didn't have a lot of examples of people doing that, but we're like, we're just going to do it. And so what we found was God was calling us to move to Portland, Oregon, and get stationed there, because we had the opportunity to stay in North Carolina where it was comfortable, I could have got to a boat station there, and I could have stayed there for another 4 years, or I could get sent to Portland, Oregon for 4 years. And we felt like God was calling us to Portland, Oregon, and we did not know why. We had never been to Portland. We had never even been to the West Coast. I had never been west of Colorado, and neither had Indi. And we were like, we just got to do it. And we did it. And the way God started to kind of orchestrate our life from there, once we submitted control, is like, it blows my mind, like looking back, because that was 2018, and he just led us to the perfect church, led us to the perfect community. This church, they didn't even know me and Indi hardly, and they asked us to be the middle school pastors. Like they believed in us, and it was the first time we had people like that saw us for who we were, you know, and believed in us and wanted more for us. And that's when like doors just started to open.
If you can tell me about once you were here, how God took your journey, where you're at now.
Yeah.
And and
Okay. So
start with
I think the more and more that we submitted, that me and Indi submitted, the more and more we saw God kind of coming through and saw his hand over every aspect, because my mind is almost blown on a daily basis of just since we've surrendered more and more. You know, it starts small. Like, so in North Carolina, we submitted our future in a way, and we were like, hey, we're gonna go wherever you send us. And so we arrived in Portland, and then it was like, all right, we're gonna submit our finances and start tithing or whatever, and then we're gonna submit our time, and just the more and more we've like given up of ourselves, the more I've seen him come through. And so that's what makes me crave to give up more, because when you read about like Paul talking about dying to the flesh and stuff, like it sounds almost like outlandish, like what, like why would you want to do that? Like, this fleshly stuff is kind of fun. And in the beginning, you can't really conceptualize how life-giving and how fruitful it will be when you actually submit everything, because like I said, every day my mind is just blown of the relationships made, of just how he provides for us, of how much like even fun we have, you know what I mean? Like how much like better things are, and how much more peaceful and restful, and how fruitful our ministries are and our work, and everything just kind of starts to work together. And it's not all, you know, unicorns and rainbows. Like, there's obviously hard times. Like, even during this interview, I just like had to roll my freaking ankle, and I'm like in pain right now. But it's like, so there's things that happen that I guess could easily get you off track of like, why does God allow this to happen to me, or, you know, why this or why that. But ultimately, when you look at life holistically, and you look at the past and how he's just woven the past, even through abuse and addictions and hurt and grief and death and all these things that have kind of happened that have led me to where I am today, it's really just amazing to look at. And I'm just like baffled, you know? And that's why I love kind of like reflecting and journaling and looking back, because it's like you see how he came through even in the times that you felt were the worst times of your life. And so with Rescue Summer School, I viewed that as the worst time of my life. And it took me almost 7 years to get over. I would still have dreams at least once a week of, I would have this specific dream where the Master Chief Rescue Swimmer would call me, and he would say, hey, we have a slot open. Do you think you can fill it? And I'd be like, yes, I'm there, you know? And then in my dream, I'd be like jumping out of the helicopter and doing all of the rescues and everything. And that haunted me for 7 years. It took me that long to get over it. And it wasn't until I found fulfillment and satisfaction in his will for my life, and being a dad and being a husband and being just a servant, you know? A servant of other people, someone that builds people up. And what I didn't realize was that desire that was in me, that I was trying to, that desire to save lives and that desire to care for people, and I was trying to fulfill that with Rescue Swimmer School. What I didn't realize was God gave me that desire, but it just looked different than how I was perceiving it, because the world wanted me to go that way. You know what I mean? Like, the world wanted, so many people kind of came in my life, like, not convincing me, but like almost like manipulating like things to go a certain direction. And it wasn't until I started listening to God's voice until I realized, like, hey, that call, it's not dead. Like, your call isn't dead just because Rescue Swimmer School is dead. It's actually alive and well, and even way fuller than it would have been if you made it through. And now you get to see people's souls saved, and see lives turned around, and see people physically taken care of, you know, because that's what I love. I love just helping people live into the fullness of their calling, you know, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And I wouldn't have been able to do that if I had made it through school. And he orchestrated all that, you know? And now I can sit here and say, and we were talking about this beforehand, I can sit here and say, like, I believe that I'm one of the most, if not the most satisfied, fulfilled people on the planet, just because every day, like, even in the midst of grief and stuff, I'm just like thankful. And I just have so much gratitude for this life that I get to live, you know? And it's not just because I live in Hawaii, you know, it's not just because I live in paradise and I have a nice family and stuff. Like, it's not just because of that, it's because he fills all the holes that I had, you know? And that's like ultimate fulfillment. Yeah, if I were to talk to someone who maybe was going down a path, it didn't work out, you know, for instance, like someone that dedicated their whole life to be in the NBA, you know, in high school, and everything's kind of devoted to that, and then the rug just gets ripped out from underneath them, and their whole life just kind of comes crashing down. That could be anything. That could be in a career, that could be in loss of a loved one, that it could be so many different things. But what I tell them is that desire that God put in them, he still wants to use it. And you just have to find where it fits in. And I think a lot of times we get caught up chasing like passion. We get caught up chasing like, oh, I'm passionate about this, so I need to do that. But what's crazy is he's used the most arbitrary, like weird things. Like he's used me in the weirdest ways where I find fulfillment. Like I was just telling someone that I love interviewing people, you know? So I'm taking classes at Pac-Rim. I just happened to sign up for this documentary class. Like I didn't really know why I signed up. And so I'm in class and I'm just like putting myself in positions constantly where I feel like God wants me to be. And then through that, he opens doors to other things. And so I think that's why God says he loves obedience more than worship. Like, you know, when Saul was offering the sacrifice, and he's like, hey, I just want you to obey me. Because through obedience, then he can use you and he can open the doors. But if you're being disobedient, then the doors aren't going to really be open. So what I tell that person, I'd be like, seek God's will. Like actually submit your life over and actually desire to be obedient to him, and then he's going to open doors, because through just this documentary class I found another passion of interviewing people, you know what I mean? And I felt so alive, and I would have never known that had I not taken him up on, not taken him up, but if I hadn't sought opportunities that he was showing me. You know, if I was just doing what I wanted to do or what I thought I wanted to do, or what the world told me I should do, then I wouldn't be in the positions that I'm in now. And so I think that's why it's really important to kind of analyze your thought processes and have paradigm shifts and know that the way you think about things might not be truth. You know what I mean? I think another area is I think we seek fulfillment a lot of times in our occupation. I think that America kind of manipulates us to think that way. And I mean, right away, what do you do when you meet somebody? What do you do? You know, not like, hey, how's your family? Like and so what I've realized recently is relationships are everything. And it's funny when I start to focus on relationships and just building genuine relationships, and not in a salesy way of like, how can I use this person in the future? Like they seem successful, let me like buddy up with them and maybe like God will open the door. Because that's a pretty like worldly view of it. And in being an entrepreneur, I found myself in those situations and it feels icky. But actually just genuinely caring about people and watching those relationships flourish, and then the doors that, you know, God opens when you're just in genuine, you know, you genuinely love someone and you genuinely care for their well-being. And so that being said, like that's probably been the most amazing side effect of being in Hawaii, is just the, you know, aloha mentality of when everyone that I meet, it feels like their family, like almost like right away. You know, it's like you meet someone and you start talking, and the relationships that I've made here in the past year, like they're the best relationships I've made in my life, and it's just happened so rapidly because of just the spirit here. And so that being said, like I have a lot of people that I just have so much gratitude. And something I've been doing lately, I've been writing letters to people that I'm grateful for, and just like describing all the things that they've done for me, and that's been really life-giving. And so right now, I mean, obviously, like first right away is like Indi. Indi saved my life. Like that's just the obvious one. Anyone that knows us knows like I'm here because of Indi, and it wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for Indi. And my girls changed my life when I had Ari, and I like held her for the first time. I just found out my brother is pregnant, or he's not pregnant. His girlfriend is pregnant, and it's their first baby, and I'm like, everything will change. Like everything will change because it just changes your perspective on everything, you know. And I just like appreciate my girls so much, and the love that I have for them, it just like, you can't even describe it. You know what I mean? It's just like so much. And then when you tap into that kind of love, it gives you a larger capacity for love for everyone. And I just like, yeah, it's just really changed my life. And then I love my siblings like a ton. Like I have 6 siblings, you know, Michael, Katie, Megan, Bridget, Sean, Connor, and I just like love each of them so dearly, and they each have a special place in my heart, and they're like so important to me. And the only reason why I am who I am today is because of the specific things that I learned from them, or the specific ways that they poured into me, you know, through my hot mess stages and whatnot. And then, you know, like even my mom and dad, even though I talked about like some of the hardships and stuff, like the reason why I am who I am today is just how they, how it sounds bad, but how they tried their best, you know, and did what they had. And I'm really thankful for my dad and us being able to mend that relationship. I think like if people knew where we were at and the fights that we were in and all the nastiness that went on before, I think it would blow their mind knowing where we're at now, and just how God is the only reason that was reconciled. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it, and that's me. I mean, the people who I love are me. Like that's how I view it. Like I'm so relational. It's like so interconnected, and I think that's one thing when we get to heaven is like when, you know, when He kind of opens the veil and we have that apocalypse of everything that was kind of going on down here, and we see how actually interconnected we all were with our relationships, it'll blow our mind. And so I know that I am who I am because of the relationships that I have, and I'm just like really grateful for that.
Part of where I am.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, my sibling, I love my siblings. I have the saying that I say, and it's probably prideful, that I would like put my siblings' relationships up against anyone, like any other siblings, just because we're so tight, and we have our faults and we have our traumas from the past that maybe not every single one of them has been worked through. But I mean, I'm being diligent in attempting to work through each one because I just love them so much. From the top bottom, you know, Michael, Katie, Megan, Bridget, Sean, Connor, like each one of them are just like so important to me and have such a special place in my heart. And I don't have time to go through and list every single thing that they've done for me, but it's just like, as soon as I think about them, I think like, you know, Michael, like showing me how to be a man, like Katie, you know, singing My Little Sunshine to me, Megan praying for me when I was having those like nightmares of eternity and just being there for me, and Bridget offering me a key when I was on drugs to her house, Sean just being my best friend all through growing up, you know, and Connor just like being like just so loyal, like even though I abandoned him and went to Coast Guard and everything, he just never abandoned me and was always there for me. And so yeah, I love them a ton. I love all of them.